Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli ko'ruvchilar. Sharq Turkiston ovozining kundalik xabarlarini ko'rishingizni qarshi olamiz. Xalqaro jinoiy ishlar soti. Balkim ko'pinchimiz bu ismni ko'p anglagan bo'lishimiz mumkin. Yaqinda Sharq Turkiston surgun hukumatining safarbarlik qilishi bilan Xitoy tajovuzchilari ustidan bu sotga qarshi sunildi. Ondaqda bu sot Sharq Turkistondagi Xitoy tajovuzchilarining zulmida ingrayotgan Sharq Turkiston xalqiga, shundaqla muhojiratdagi Sharq Turkistonliklarning hayotiga qanday ta'sirlarni olib keladi? Sharq Turkistonliklardan bu sotning muvaffaqiyatli bo'lishi uchun nimalar talab qilindi? Bu vaqtdagi savollarimizga javob topish uchun yaqinda Sharq Turkiston surgun hukumatining rahbarlari, shundaqla xalqarалық advokatlardan Rodney Dixon apandi qatorliqlar ishtirok qilgan to'r yig'inini diqqatingizga sundiq. Tuvanda diqqatinglar ekranimizda bo'lsin.
Hello and welcome everyone today. I think we're in quite a few time zones, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for tuning in to this information session today. My name is Nikita Bernardi, and I've been working with the legal team as well as the East Turkestan government in exile and the East Turkestan National Awakening movement for the past year to raise awareness and do public outreach for a complaint that was submitted to the International Criminal Court in July of last year. Just a very brief introduction before we begin. As many of you might have seen or read last week, and the reason for this session today, the legal team, who I will introduce in a brief second, submitted a hefty dossier of evidence to the Office of the Prosecutor last Thursday. And this evidence was submitted in order to establish jurisdiction for the International Criminal Court over crimes which are being committed by Chinese authorities against Uyghurs. So on the legal team is led by Mr. Rodney Dixon QC from Temple Garden Chambers, who have offices in London and The Hague. Mr. Dixon is in The Hague at the moment, which is the head where the International Criminal Court is based. We also have Anne Coulon as part of the team, and Paul Erdernest, and the three of them have been working tirelessly for the past few months to compile this brand new dossier of evidence which establishes jurisdiction which we believe establishes jurisdiction for the court to begin investigations. We also have here with us today Dr. Mamtanin Allah, who is a doctor of philosophy. He is a strategic advisor to the East Turkestan government in exile, and he will be helping today with translating questions and answers in English and Uyghur and any other comments that you may have for us here today. We also have Mr. Gulam Osman Yagma, who is the president of the East Turkestan government in exile, and we also have Mr. Saleh Hudayar, who is the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile and the founder of the East Turkestan National Awakening movement. So before we begin, thank you all very much for joining us today once again. If you do have questions or comments and you are following us on social media or YouTube, you can quite simply type the comments or questions just underneath the live stream in the comment section, and the questions will come through to us. We will then answer the questions at the end of our brief description and speeches. So perhaps, Dr. Allah, would you mind just briefly translating the administrative side of that so that people know how to do Q&A, and then we can begin with Mr. Dixon. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Allah.
Bugünkü yığınninki başqurğuchisi men Nikita Bernardi. Men bu yerda Angliyada joylashgan bir sot gruppasininki sot advokatlar gruppasi bilan birlikda ishlayman. Bugungi yig'inimizning asosiy maqsadlaridan biri xuddi biz ilgari e'lon qilinganiga o'xshash bu qatim biz xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga Uyg'urlarga munosabatli jumladan Uyg'urlarninki boshqa davlatlardan Xitoyga majburiy qaytarilib ketishiga aloqador yangi dalillarni tepib, bu dalillarni xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga sunduq. Shu munosabat bilan biz bugun bu haqdagi sizlarga bu vaqtda texnimi kengri va texnimi tafsiliy ma'lumotlarni berishga tirishamiz. Xabaringizda bo'lganidek, xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotininki bu qatim yangi tayinlangan qaralg'uchi amaldori bizningki intayin tafsili yozilgan Uyg'urlarninki shu chet ellardan Xitoyga majburiy qaytarilib ketish ahvoliga aloqador materiallarimizni topshirib oldi. Bizning bu materiallarni tayyorlash orqali yetmoqchi bo'lgan nishonimiz Xitoyninki Uyg'urlarninki haq huquqlarini dafsan qilayotganlik va eng oxirida Xitoylarninki Uyg'ur xalqiga qarata elib berayotgan qat'iyamiga qarata jinoiy paketlarni to'plash va bu jinoiy paketlarni xalqaro soti orqali bir taraf qilish maqsadiga yetishni ko'zlaymiz. Shu munosabat bilan bugun biz bizningki ataqliq Angliyada turishliq ham ishxonasi ham Angliyada va ham Den Haag'da yoki The Hague deymiz. Ikkilisida ishxonasi bor. Rodney Dixon apandim bor. Bu o'zi xalqaro jinoiy ishlar soti bo'yicha advokatlikdagi advokati bizningki butun ishlarimizga yetakchilik qilayotgan kishi bo'ladi. Uning bilan bir vaqtda bugun bizning guruhning a'zolari, shuningdek Sharq Turkiston sürgün hukumatiningki raisi G'ulom Osmon Yag'mi apandi va Sharq Turkiston sürgün hukumatiningki bosh ministri Salih Xudoyor va men Sharq Turkiston sürgün hukumatiningki strategik maslahatchisi men Mamtumin Alla qatorliqlar bugungi bu yig'inimizga qatnashyapmiz. Endi mening asosiy vazifam bugungi tushgan savollarni agar Uyg'ur tushgan bo'lsa tarjima qilish, shuning bilan bir vaqtda hozirga o'xshash so'zlangan ba'zi muhim qismlarni inglizchadan Uyg'urchaga tarjima qilish yoki Uyg'urcha berilgan bo'lsa Uyg'urchadan inglizchaga tarjima qilish vazifasini o'tayman. Bugungi vazifam asosli. Shunga bugun sizlarningki mush qitimliq yig'inga oid savolinglar bo'lsa, mushu bizningki savollarni yozdigan bir nimamiz bor. Mushu qarsang chiqadi, ko'rayotgan mushu ekraninglarda. Shu yerga savolinglarni qo'yib qo'ysangiz, mayli qaysi xil tilda bo'lsin, hatto Xitoy tilida so'rasanglar bo'ladi, inglizcha, Uyg'urcha yoki Xitoycha 3 xil tilda so'rasanglar bo'ladi. Mush savollarning hammasini men eng oxirida bizning mutaxassisimiz javob berdi va bu javobni men sizlarga Uyg'urcha tarjima qilib diqqatingizga sunaman. Shuning bilan hozircha tugdi. Qani diqqatinglar bizningki bugungi programmamizda bo'lsin. Nikita, translation is finished.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alla. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Mr. Rodney Dixon QC, who's going to give a description of the work that we've been doing for the past few months and what we expect to be doing beyond this week as well. So thank you very much, Rodney Dixon, over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introductions and welcome to everybody attending our discussion today. I understand there will be translations of what I say. Will that be done as I go along or at the end?
We'll do that at the end.
All right. I'm going to provide an update for everyone today where we stand in the ICC case here in The Hague. The team, that's myself and Anne and Paul and Nikita, have been working over the last number of months to advance the case here. And it's very important that you are all informed about where we are and that you continue to support our case as much as possible, talk about it, spread the word. It is so important that people know about it in order for it to be advanced at the ICC. The more it is in the public domain, the more chance we have of succeeding. So I would encourage you to go out and to engage with others and also continue to support us because we need that in order to arrive at our destination, which is to get the ICC to take the case, open an investigation, and look to bring charges against those responsible. So it's a case where there can be actual prosecutions of persons in the future, and we mustn't lose sight of that. It does take time. I know that is frustrating for many of you following this. It's also frustrating for us as the lawyers as well. But that's the way the justice process at the international level works. It's a slow, methodical process. But if we stick at it, I'm confident that we can succeed. But we have to be very determined. We mustn't lose faith, and we must continue to support each other to get there. Now's not the time to be doubting or raising questions. It's the time for unity, for all Uyghurs and all of those who support the Uyghur community to unite together to ensure that we get this over the finish line. It will not be done next month. I can't tell you that here today. It's not going to be done this year, but it can be done in the months and years ahead, providing we are rigidly determined and that we don't at any point fall back, slacken, and doubt ourselves. Where are we today then? You will recall that in December of last year, the ICC prosecutor told us when we had filed our complaint to her to open an investigation, she told us at that stage, no, I'm not ready to move. I do not have enough evidence that the court has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is the basis for the court to operate. If they don't have the jurisdiction, we can't go ahead. That's what she told us in a nutshell. But she also said to us that if you get further evidence, then bring it to me and we will look at this and I will make a decision then about opening an investigation. We explained to her that we had not been able to get all of the evidence because of COVID restrictions and other problems, that we were still investigating and that would continue and that we would be back very soon with the further evidence. We are now at that point. We, from January up until May, conducted our investigations. We were able to get persons on the ground in various countries conducting interviews, recording interviews, taking photographs of what they were able to see as well. Now, we can't go, unfortunately, into the detail of this because it's very sensitive material. There are obvious security considerations. So we have to be very careful. But all of that material has been gathered and it is now available and submitted to the prosecutor. So the prosecutor's office has it. They will keep it secure. But we can't go into as much detail as we would want to at this stage. Obviously, in the future, that will be different, we hope. It will emerge. But for now, what I can very clearly confirm with you is that from January to May, we conducted these investigations and we were able to get a substantial body of evidence, which we've submitted to the prosecutor last week, addressing exactly the issues that she said we needed to. She said that there were a number of questions that were not properly addressed because there wasn't sufficient evidence. We've now given the prosecutor that evidence. And we are urging the prosecutor now to look at it and then take the step, which they were not able to do in December, but we say they are definitely able to do now with that evidence, to open an investigation. The prosecutor in this case would have to act under his or her own powers to go to the judges to request that an investigation is opened. That's exactly what the prosecutor did in the Rohingya case involving both Myanmar and Bangladesh. She went to the judges asking for an investigation to be opened. And we say exactly the same can be done and must be done in the Uyghur case. We are using, as I've explained to you before, the Rohingya case as a precedent, which means what has been done in that case applies equally in our case. In that case, they said that even though the main country concerned, Myanmar, and in our case it's China, is not signed up to the ICC, that doesn't mean that the court doesn't have jurisdiction. If an element of the crime that you are alleging takes place in an ICC state party territory, in that case it was Bangladesh, persons being forced into Bangladesh. In our case, it's Tajikistan and Cambodia, which are both ICC state parties, where we say that acts have occurred that are elements of crimes over which the court has jurisdiction. And because they occur on the territory of the ICC state party, the prosecutor can therefore investigate. As long as one element occurs there, then the court has jurisdiction over that aspect, but also the continuation of that crime into China as well. So that's the precedent we're using. It applies in our case, and we were saying she should follow the same steps that she did in the Rohingya case, a very important case. But the Uyghur case is one that should also be investigated in the same way. She should apply that precedent now and open an investigation as she's done there by going to the judges, should have to make the application to the judges, presenting the evidence and asking that she can then have a full investigation, so that the purpose of that is to then decide whether you can bring charges against the actual people who have perpetrated these deeds. So what is the evidence that we are talking about that has taken place on an ICC state party? This is the new evidence that we've gathered, which we have given to the prosecutor. I can't go into detail as I've emphasized, but I will give you an outline to show you how important this evidence is. It is absolutely critical evidence. This is a groundbreaking moment. It's the first time that this kind of evidence has been acquired and given to the ICC prosecutor. So this is not to be underestimated in any way whatsoever. And you've seen probably the extensive media coverage from last week on it, with many journalists picking up on it and highlighting how historic this moment is. What we've been able to find from our investigations is that Chinese authorities, Chinese operatives, have in fact gone onto the territory of an ICC state party, that's Tajikistan in this case. We will also be looking at Cambodia in due course, but we focused on Tajikistan in this case. We have found that there is evidence that Chinese operatives have gone on to the territory of an ICC state party, and they have identified, targeted, and rounded up Uyghur persons living there in order to deport them back to China. And in the cases that we've looked at, those persons who have been in that way detained and taken back by Chinese officials, they have never been heard from or seen again. Our investigations show, and I can't go into how these figures have all been calculated, but they show, and it's based on proper evidence, that at a minimum 85% to 90% of the Uyghur population in Tajikistan has been targeted and moved out into China over the past number of years. 2016, 17, and 18, and going into 19 were the main times when that happened. It was done in small amounts so as not to attract attention. Persons were moved in small groups so that it wouldn't be noticed overnight, like 1,000 people disappearing overnight. So it shows a very sophisticated and cunning campaign to do this just below the radar, over time and patiently, in order to achieve the goal of ensuring that there are no Uyghurs essentially left in Tajikistan, and that they're all in China where they can be targeted, controlled, and persecuted. Our evidence shows that there are around about 100 Uyghurs left in Tajikistan, and they are heavily controlled by Chinese operatives. They're under surveillance. They are very afraid. It's a toxic environment. There's also evidence that this is happening in other countries as well. Some of them signed up to the ICC, others not. in those places where obviously China can't just go in, in many European countries, in Australia, persons are being threatened there by using family members who are back in China to call them, or to get Chinese officials to call them, to tell them they have to come back, otherwise persons there would be harmed. That same approach was used to some extent in Tajikistan, but as I said, there's also evidence that force was directly used to gather up persons and bring them back. There's also evidence that persons have just disappeared randomly, never to be heard from again. The way that it has unfolded is noteworthy. It shows a degree of overall planning and implementation, which shows that it wasn't just done at a whim. It was planned at the highest level and implemented in a systematic way, with Uyghurs who are there, living there, have lived there for many, many years and working there, having their paperwork questioned by the Chinese consulate in Tajikistan. And when they're not able to address those issues, then the authorities detain them and they are deported back by Chinese operatives into China. The paperwork questions that we've been able to find out about are really a ruse. They're made up. It's not as though they've got real immigration problems. It's a way of trying to put a legal veneer on a fundamentally unlawful act and a crime against humanity. So that can't be used as a defense by China that, oh, well, these people have all broken immigration laws. That's just not true. We know that they will probably try and say that. That's why they've done it with this so-called legal justification. But there is none, and they can't be the ones to determine whether or not there has been a breach of any national laws in order to decide whether persons can be brought back. Because their real intention, from the evidence that we've gathered, is to ensure that people are brought back regardless, and they're not allowed to live normal lives there, and they're brought back so that they can be targeted inside China. And we know what's happening inside China with mass detentions, torture, sterilization, rape, persons disappearing. We have also submitted a body of evidence that has come out recently, or that we haven't been aware of previously, to the ICC to show what is happening inside China, to connect it to the events outside, and in order to show the overall degree to which this is planned and implemented at the highest levels. It shows both the conduct, but also the intent of those who are implementing this at the very highest levels. So the new evidence that we have gathered is a breakthrough. I mean, it shows that if you're coming onto the territory of an ICC state party, then you lose your so-called immunity because you haven't signed up. When you come onto the territory of another state who is a party to the ICC, you are subject to that state's laws, as occurs all the time whenever we travel around the world. You can't say, well, I'm immune from your laws because I'm not a national of your country, or my country hasn't signed up to the same things that you've signed up. You are responsible for ensuring that you obey the laws of that country. And by not doing that, China has exposed themselves. The officials of China have exposed themselves to the ICC's jurisdiction. And they can't say that because they haven't signed up, they are now able to escape. That's not the way the law works. They know that. And they would certainly not allow you to go to China and say, oh, well, my country's not signed up, so therefore I can do whatever I want here. They would apply Chinese laws to anyone, irrespective of their nationality, as they are entitled to do within the borders of their own country. That's what's happening here with Tajikistan. The state party has signed up, and when other countries come in and commit unlawful acts, then those acts can be referred to the ICC for investigation. Those acts in and of themselves, the targeting of people, the abductions, the detentions and deportations, are crimes that come within the ICC's jurisdiction as crimes against humanity. But we also want to emphasize, and this is where it comes back to the Rohingya precedent I mentioned earlier, that what we see happening here is not just those acts isolated on their own. those acts in Tajikistan, the ones I've described, are the very first acts within the overall plan of China to commit crimes against humanity and genocide against the Uyghur persons. Now, yes, we know what's happening inside. There's been wide reporting on that. But when you go outside of China and round up persons in order to bring them back, we say that that is the first act in the alleged genocide plan and the alleged plan to commit both genocide and crimes against humanity. Going out to arrest persons in that way and bringing them back is the first stage to then taking them inside the country to persecute and eradicate them. You can't do it unless you have the arrest first of all. There's some of those arrests, as we know, taking place inside China on a widespread scale, but there are also some taking place outside of China to bring persons back into East Turkestan. So not only are the acts that the Chinese authorities committing on Tajikistan territory a basis for jurisdiction, but they are also, because of their continuation into China, where other acts then occur. And based on the Rohingya precedent, our submission is that the court has jurisdiction over the whole crime. So not only what happens in Tajikistan, but as it continues cross-border as a continuing crime into China as well. And that's why we're asking the prosecutor to look at the allegation of genocide, but then also crimes against humanity for the deportations and the persecution and the range of other acts that are occurring. Because she has jurisdiction not only over the acts that start in Tajikistan, but also then what continues thereafter, because they're part of the same ongoing unlawful conduct. We've set that all out based on the evidence. We've supplied the evidence. I can't go into the details of how that has been set out and exactly what it contains, but what it shows are these aspects that I've highlighted now. There's also a category of evidence quite significantly which shows how the border areas are increasingly controlled by China, the Tajik-Chinese border, with increased fortifications and steps being taken to prevent Uyghurs now from getting out of China. Our allegation is that Uyghurs have been able to flee, and that is a crime in and of itself, fleeing from China into an ICC state party, but that recently there have been increased attempts to ensure that that border is virtually uncrossable, with Chinese installations set up, some within Tajikistan, with border areas heavily patrolled, and that shows the intention as well of the Chinese authorities to make sure they can use that border to get people out when they need, but also to stop them crossing there. And if they do cross, to be able to arrest them and bring them back. So there's a further body of evidence that we've submitted from our investigations along those lines. Our investigation is continuing. This is not the end of it. Our investigators have been on the ground for some time and still are. We will keep getting further evidence. We say what there is now is sufficient for the prosecutor to take the step of opening an investigation, but also that there will be further evidence down the line. So we are therefore encouraging the prosecutor who's leaving and the new prosecutor who's in fact coming in this week to have a full examination of all of our evidence and further evidence that we are going to present, and to look to swiftly move to make an application to open an investigation. This is a shocking discovery that we've made, and it simply can't now be overlooked. There are, yes, jurisdictional issues, but we have firmly addressed them, and it would be a dismay, not only to those who've come forward and given the evidence, but also others who are going to, if this wasn't looked at further. We believe that there's more evidence to come, and a signal should be sent that that evidence can be provided, and that this is not going to be blocked. This is going to be something where all of the evidence can come out, and it can be thoroughly looked at by an independent international court. I want to conclude by saying that this is the only body at the international level that can actually investigate and prosecute Chinese officials for what has happened. It might take some time, but it's the only body that can do it. And it will be based on this evidence and the further evidence that is gathered. It's the only hope for having prosecutions at the international level. And we need to keep that alive, because that will send the message that you can't simply get away with this on the basis that no one is going to prosecute you. This will send out a very clear signal that you're being watched, and that if there are further acts committed, they will be prosecuted. It's one of the few ways in which we can, at this stage, seek to deter the crimes and ensure that they are not repeated on the grand scale that is going on at the moment. So it is vital that the ICC take that stance and that we all support it to do so. We have had widespread support from politicians, from parliaments, from MPs, and we hope that that will continue, because we need to show to the ICC that this is not an isolated campaign. It's one that has an international resonance. The ICC was set up to deal with exactly these kinds of mass human rights violations. This is a case like none other for the ICC to address. And we hope now that with the evidence that we've provided, that very important step will be taken very soon. We are, in the coming months, just so you know where we're going to round off, going to be continuing with the investigation, but we're also going to be looking to engage with the prosecutor, because the prosecutor did say to us that they would meet with us once this evidence was made available. So we're looking to do that, and looking through that process of engagement to get the next step taken of having examined all the available evidence, making the application for the investigation to be opened. We really can't emphasize enough how far we've come in a short space of time. We are hoping that the process can now be speeded up as much as possible. But we need you to remain with us each step of the way. And that's honestly going to make all the difference. Not for us to be questioning, for us to be divided. We need to be as united as we can now to achieve our ultimate goal of justice and accountability for those who have suffered and those who continue to suffer. Thank you very much. I will leave it at that for now, but I'm sure there'll be questions, and I can address any other matters when those arise. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Rodney. I'm now going to pass the floor to the president of the East Turkestan government in exile. I believe he's going to say a few words, and also then to Saleh Hudaya, the Prime Minister. And Dr. Allah, perhaps you will need to translate what the president says into English, if possible.
Okay. G'ulomka, siz ozroq gap qilamsiz? Sizning gapingizni men tarjima qilib beraman. Uyg'urcha qilsangiz inglizchaga.
Oh, he's on mute.
Naq meydanını teşkilleyen Rodney Dixon başçılığındaki advokatlar gruppası. Şundaqla bu naq meydanını ekrandan görüvatkan barlık Şarkı Türkistanlık eziz halkım, hammalarga salam. Advokatlar gruppasının Şarkı Türkistan halkı üçün bu işni qilayotganligi ta'rifga sig'maydigan bir ulug'liqqa ega. 21-asrda inson qalbidan chiqqan qatlamga uchrayotgan Sharqi Turkistonlik xalq uchun, butun dunyo tarafidan tashlab etilgan, yetim qolgan Sharqi Turkiston xalqi uchun Holocaust uchrayotgan Şarkı Türkistan halkı için. İgisiz Şarkı Türkistan halkı için bu işini kılavatkanlığınla işinemenki ulug'luqda çokum tarih yazılgısı. Hakkınlarda tarih yazılgısı ve sizler için abide tiklengisi. Bu noktada ben Şarkı Türkistan halkıga vakaleten hammanlarga rahmet eytime. Şundaqla bu davada muvaffaqiyet kazanış için Şarkı Türkistan halkı umumyüzlük biz tarafta turuşu ve bizni qollaşı naytı zörür. Şuna halkımga bizni qollashqa maddi bo'lmagandimi, ma'naviy jihatdan bizni qollashqa, bizga hamdam bo'lishqa chaqiraman va bizni yolg'iz qo'ymasligini umid qilaman.
This is the translation of the president of the East Turkestan government in exile. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the lawyers team led by Mr. Rodney, and for them giving this presentation today. And secondly, I would like to express my gratitude to the people of East Turkestan who are watching this program today. And so the whole aim of today's program is to look at one of the most horrific crimes against humanity and also genocide in the 21st century that Uyghurs are going through. This is the horrific crime against a people who are abandoned by the world and who are going through the same kind of Holocaust that Jewish people went through. And this is the work that this team has done is a great, splendid, beyond any description. Because when the Uyghurs are so helpless and hopeless, they come to our aid to open investigation into this genocide. And this, your dedication, your work will be written in history, not only in our history, but history as such, because of its magnanimity, in particular, its importance for the lives of Uyghurs. And at the same time, and I would like to call upon my people, the people of East Turkestan, to support us, not necessarily from a material basis, but also, most importantly, from the moral basis, a spiritual basis, because we need you. Don't leave us alone, because this struggle is very complicated, very difficult, and everlasting. That's why we would like you to be with us on this very long and very difficult journey. But at the end of the day, we would like to see justice is done, and with the work of this team. And finally, I would like you to support us. I am calling upon my people of East Turkestan, never lose your hope and be with us. We will finish this very important task in our history. Thank you for your watching.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Allah, and thank you, Mr. President. Now I'll hand over to the Prime Minister for a few quick comments before we move on to the Q&A portion of the event. So over to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you. I will try to keep this very brief. As Mr. Rodney Dixon, QC, stated earlier, the ICC is the only body in the international community under established international laws to be able to investigate and prosecute Chinese officials for genocide and other crimes against humanity. And it is precisely this reason that we initiated this formal complaint back in July of last year. Given the new evidence that we have submitted recently, there is jurisdiction, we're hoping, placed on what we found through our investigations. We know that there is jurisdiction to establish an investigation as soon as possible to ultimately help us seek justice. What the Uyghurs are going through right now, as reiterated by many of the speakers before me, is the most atrocious crimes against humanity and genocide that we have witnessed post-Holocaust, especially in the 21st century. That's why we call on all governments around the world, especially governments that adhere to democracy, that adhere to human rights, that adhere to freedom, and especially those that are member states of the International Criminal Court, to support our case, to support us in obtaining justice through the international laws. In order for us, victimized peoples, oppressed peoples like us, the International Criminal Court is unfortunately the only avenue for us to seek justice for the crimes that are happening today. Thus, it's important that the ICC, the Office of the Prosecutor, and the judges open this investigation, because it also puts the credibility of the ICC at line as well. Because if the ICC fails to investigate the most atrocious humanitarian crisis that is happening in the 21st century, then it loses credibility to investigate other matters, other crimes that are happening in other parts of the world. So in this regard, we are hopeful that the ICC will open the investigation as soon as possible, and we are calling on, again, all governments, organizations, and individuals who care about the Uyghurs, who care about human rights, who care about justice, who care about ending atrocities, to help us by supporting our case at the ICC, both materially and morally and spiritually. Thank you.
Bugungi programmamizni yoqtirib ko'rganingizga rahmat. Ko'rishguncha omon bo'linglar. Xayr xo'sh, Allohga omonat.